The Young and the Restless spoilers shock next 2 week June 23 to July 4, 2025. The chateau still smelled faintly of roses and white wine, the kind of perfume that lingered after an event designed to impress. But now, as the last vestiges of sunlight filtered through stained glass windows and gilded chandeliers flickered above a room that no longer pulsed with music, the mood had shifted dramatically. The party was over? Not because it had ended, but because the truth had burst it open like a bottle of shaken champagne. The name Aristotle Dumas no longer held mystique. It was now a punchline. A mask. A trick. And the man behind it, Cain Ashby, was about to face the collective fury of Genoa City's elite. The guests had not yet left, though many lingered only out of confusion, indignation, or the morbid desire to witness what came next. What had been pitched as an extravagant European getaway, hosted by a mysterious international mogul, had unraveled into something far darker, a vanity-fueled illusion orchestrated by a man they thought they knew. The conversations that once danced with gossip and champagne now trembled with betrayal and unanswered questions. Every corner of the drawing room was filled with huddled pairs or small groups whispering, gesturing, trying to piece together how they'd been duped, and by someone who had walked among them for years without raising suspicion. Victor Newman, of course, had no patience for confusion. He had not come all the way to France to be played for a fool, and certainly not by someone like Cain. When the host of the chateau nervously attempted to offer a refill on his scotch, Victor waved him off with a look that could have frozen lava. "I want to see him," he growled to no one in particular, and the room fell into a nervous hush. Conversations broke apart. Eyes shifted. The staff disappeared. Victor wasn't just demanding an audience, he was summoning judgment. Not far away, Lily Winters stood motionless, her arms crossed tightly over her chest as if trying to hold herself together. Of all the people in that room, it was perhaps Lily who had the most reason to fall apart. Cain had once been her husband. Her partner. Her undoing and her redemption, all wrapped into one complicated history. And now she found herself confronting the idea that he had not only returned to the center of her life, but had done so behind a different name, cloaked in deception, and inviting her, no, luring her, into a spectacle of lies. Her face was pale, not from embarrassment, but from the sheer emotional whiplash. She had come expecting answers and closure, and instead found herself trapped in a psychological maze that mirrored the literal one she'd just wandered through. She looked around the room and saw familiar faces blurred by uncertainty. Amanda Sinclair stood near a large antique mirror, arms crossed, lips drawn in a thin line of regret. Billy Abbott paced near the marble fireplace, muttering to himself, clearly trying to reconcile the agreement he'd once made with the man he thought was Dumas. Sharon sat quietly near the window, still weary from her earlier trauma, but her eyes sharp, watching. Watching everything. Watching Cain's world unravel. It didn't take long for Victor to find Cain. He had retreated to the back salon, where the mirrors were taller than the doorways and the velvet curtains were thick enough to muffle screams. He didn't try to flee, Cain knew there was nowhere to run. When Victor entered, the two men locked eyes, and for a moment, no words were spoken. It was Victor who broke the silence. "What was the endgame, Ashby?" he asked, his voice low but lethal. "You pull this stunt, embarrass everyone, and think what, we'd toast you for it?" Cain remained calm, though a muscle in his jaw twitched. "It wasn't meant to be a stunt," he said finally. "It was meant to be a statement." Victor scoffed. "A statement? Of what? That you've mastered the art of deceit? That you can steal power instead of earn it?" Cain's eyes darkened. "That I was done being ignored," he said. "Done being dismissed. Dumas got things done. Cain Ashby never even got in the room." Back in the main hall, the guests were not waiting idly. Word of Cain's confrontation with Victor was already trickling out, adding fuel to the growing fire of speculation and fury. Lily stood in the center of it all, her confusion now hardened into anger. She turned on Amanda, her voice sharp. You knew, didn't you? He asked you to say he was Dumas? Amanda didn't flinch. He didn't give me all the details, Lily. Just enough to make it sound legitimate. He didn't tell me it would turn into this. Lily shook her head. It always turns into this with him. Meanwhile, Billy was unraveling in his own way. He pulled out his phone, scrolling back through the old encrypted messages he'd received from Dumas's negotiations, terms, even a meeting location. I played ball with this guy, he muttered, barely noticing when Sally stepped beside him. He negotiated a deal with me like we were partners. But he wasn't Dumas. He was Kane. And he let me make decisions based on a lie. Sally, whose own reputation had taken a hit from her promotion of Dumas's ventures, clenched her fists. He humiliated all of us. This isn't just about deception, it's about control. He wanted to puppeteer us, and now he wants sympathy? Jack arrived shortly after, and when he was told what had happened, his face went stone cold. He used my company's name, he said quietly. He traded on the reputation of everyone in this room. And for what? To feel powerful? The Abbotts, the Newmans, the Winters, all present, all insulted, all left exposed. Lily, who had had enough, pushed through the crowd and found her way back to the hedge maze where it had all begun. She didn't want the lights, the music, the whispers. She wanted air. She wanted truth. She wanted to scream. Instead, she paced in the center of the labyrinth, remembering every twist, every turn, how it all symbolized the games Kane always played. How she had always been the one trying to find her way back to him, and how now, finally, she was done. By the time Kane emerged again, standing at the top of the grand staircase, the entire room fell silent. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his face tired, but there was a quiet resolve in his eyes. I didn't do this to hurt you, he said, his voice carrying even in the heavy silence. I did it because I wanted to matter. Lily stepped forward. You mattered. You always mattered. You just didn't believe it. So you turned yourself into a stranger. And now none of us know who you are anymore. Billy added, and you've got a funny way of showing gratitude. You played us all. You lied to our faces. And now you expect what, forgiveness? That we just forget everything? Victor stepped in last, his presence alone silencing the room. No one forgets, Kane, he said. Not in this city. Not in this world. You may have worn a new name, but your mistakes still carry your old one. And trust me, this isn't over. And with that, the crowd began to disperse, not with fanfare, not with applause, but with fury, betrayal, and silence. The party that was meant to impress had become the wound that would take years to heal. And Kane Ashby, once hidden behind the grandeur of Aristotle Dumas, was now exposed to the full, brutal weight of Genoa City's wrath. But deep down, even he knew. Some truths don't just end a chapter. They start a war. Let me know if you'd like to continue. Victor's retaliation? Billy and Sally launching a public exposé? Lily cutting ties? Or even Kane's next move in reclaiming control? This saga has many explosive directions to go. The storm had not yet broken over the French chateau, but the pressure in the air was unbearable. Victor Newman stood in the center of a private salon, tall, composed, and entirely unforgiving. While across from him, Kane Ashby faced judgment not only from the most powerful man in Genoa City but from the weight of his own deceit. No longer cloaked in the mystique of Aristotle Dumas, Kane wore his name plainly now, but it was not without arrogance. He knew what he had built, and he wasn't going to dismantle it for the sake of regret or approval. Victor's interrogation began with silence, his most dangerous weapon. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He merely looked, and the weight of his stare made it feel like the walls themselves were closing in. When he finally spoke, the words were carved from stone. He wanted answers, not just to why Kane had donned the persona of Aristotle Dumas, but how. How had a man with such a checkered past amassed billions in less than a decade? How had he eluded scrutiny from governments, investors, and even Victor himself? And more importantly, what was he hiding? Kane didn't blink. He stood straight, his voice level, almost defiant. He explained that Dumas wasn't a shell game or an illusion, he was an evolution. He had spent 6 years building an empire, brick by legal brick, backed by clever deals, offshore diversification, and ruthless efficiency. The billions were real. The profits were clean. Every cent, every partnership, every acquisition had passed legal standards, audited, tested, and protected by some of the best minds in international finance. He had not cheated. He had outplayed. And while Victor had ruled Genoa City, Kane had conquered the world. But Victor didn't accept words at face value, never had. He pressed harder, pushing Kane with questions laced in implication. Was it laundering? Was there blackmail involved? Hidden heirs? Extortion? Arms deals? Kane's denial was immediate and passionate. He swore everything was legitimate, and the only crime he'd committed was daring to believe he could rewrite his reputation without asking permission from the old guard. Still, the doubt hung thick in the air, because in Genoa City, success without explanation was almost always a mask for sin. Later that evening, in a quiet corner of the estate, Amanda Sinclair requested a private meeting with Kane. It wasn't a legal discussion, it was personal. Her voice, though calm, carried urgency. She had represented powerful men before. She had seen what happened when ego blinded ambition. And she had watched Victor Newman dismantle lives not through violence, but through the methodical obliteration of legacy. She begged Kane not to underestimate him, reminding him that Victor didn't retaliate like others. He didn't rage. He destroyed reputations slowly, surgically, until there was nothing left but ruin. But Kane, still cloaked in the intoxicating confidence of his transformation into Dumas, gave her a weary smile and said Victor had already underestimated him. More dangerously, he added that he had underestimated Dumas. Because while Victor had been watching boardrooms, Dumas had been building infrastructure. While Victor had fought over territory, Dumas had created networks too vast and too global to be taken down with a press conference or a leaked document. Amanda, knowing Kane better than most, saw the arrogance taking root. And that terrified her more than any threat Victor could pose. Unbeknownst to them, Phyllis Summers had overheard it all. Red had never been known for discretion, and when she stepped into the room, she carried with her a force of emotion that shattered the tense calm. Her eyes burned as she stared down Kane. She hadn't been part of the plot, but she had been drawn into the fallout. She had defended him, again. Believed in him, again. And now? Now she was a footnote in a scandal that made fools of them all. Her voice was low, but the pain was raw when she told him she would never have done this to him, never would have played games with identity and trust. And though she said no more, the message was clear, she wasn't just angry. She was done. As Phyllis left the room, more guests began arriving. The tension in the chateau turned electric with the entrance of Michael Baldwin and Lauren Fenmore Baldwin, their presence always signaling that something official, something consequential, was about to unfold. Abby Winters trailed behind them, still reeling from the emotional weight of her family's involvement in the fiasco, while Chance Chancellor stood by her side, every instinct in his body reading the room like a crime scene. His training told him that this wasn't just a social event gone wrong, this was the prelude to war. As the guests mingled in the outer rooms, awkwardly navigating conversations built on half-truths and shattered trust, word continued to spread that Victor had confronted Kane directly. The whispers grew louder, not just about Kane's deception, but about his motives. Why go to these lengths? Why manipulate old friends, former lovers, business rivals, and even adversaries just to host a lavish party under a false name? Was it ego? Was it revenge? Or was there something far deeper at play, something they still didn't understand? Back in Genoa City, things weren't any quieter. Claire Grace Newman had been following the chaos abroad with mild detachment until her phone buzzed with a notification she didn't expect. A message from Holden Novak. Just a simple question. Dinner? And to her own surprise, she didn't hesitate. The night air in Genoa City was calm, deceptive in its stillness. Holden picked her up without fanfare. They dined in a quiet corner of society, the lights dimmed low, the wine flowing freely. He made her laugh. He made her forget. But Kyle Abbott hadn't forgotten. Somewhere in the city, Kyle stared at the headlines flashing across his screen, about Dumas, about the fallout in France, about the Newman family's involvement. But when he saw a photo someone had snapped outside society, Claire and Holden, standing close, smiling, it wasn't betrayal he felt. It was something worse. It was doubt. Doubt about whether Claire had ever truly meant the things she said. Doubt about whether Holden had simply been waiting for the moment Kane's chaos gave him a clear opening. Back in France, Victor stood alone in the candlelit study, staring into a fireplace that burned not for warmth but for symbolism. Nikki entered quietly, waiting. When she finally spoke, it was with the weight of years. "Do you believe him?" she asked. Victor's silence was telling. "I believe he believes himself," he said finally. "But that's not the same thing." The next morning, the staff found the chateau eerily quiet, as if the walls themselves were exhausted by the emotional combustion that had taken place inside them. Some guests had left in the night. Others remained, unsure of what came next. But the story was far from over. Because Victor had left one message behind, one that would be delivered not to Kane, but to the press. A statement. A warning. And a declaration that in the war of legacies, only one name would be remembered. And it would not be Dumas. Let me know if you'd like to continue with Claire and Kyle's confrontation, the press turning on Kane, Victor's silent campaign to strip Kane of his empire, or Holden's rising role in a new Newman-Abbott conflict. This storyline has layers left to burn. By the time the sun dipped beneath the elegant Parisian skyline, casting long shadows across the marble halls of the chateau, most of the guests had already exhausted their outrage. The original wave of shock had passed, replaced now by quieter, more introspective questions, the kind that echoed inward rather than outward. No one, after all, could deny the truth anymore. Aristotle Dumas was Kane Ashby. And yet, somehow, the revelation left more confusion in its wake than clarity. The deception had ended, but its consequences were only beginning to unfold. In a quiet corridor just off the main dining room, Sharon sat on a bench beneath a Renaissance painting, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze distant. She had been through a lifetime of drama, betrayal, loss, reinvention, and yet this? This still managed to throw her. "This is so strange," she whispered to herself, shaking her head slightly. "No one saw this coming. Not one of us." And she wasn't wrong. For all the intrigue and speculation, not a single soul in the room had guessed that the elusive billionaire pulling strings in Genoa City had been walking among them for years in the form of Kane Ashby, the man with a legacy built more on broken promises than brilliance. Not far away, Phyllis Summers stormed through the lower hallways of the estate, her heels clicking with every sharp step. She wasn't done yet. She had too many questions, and not nearly enough patience for polite silence. When she found Amanda Sinclair lingering outside one of the side salons, she didn't hesitate. "You knew something," Phyllis snapped. "You had to." Amanda remained calm, unflinching in the face of Red's fiery confrontation. "I respected Kane," she replied coolly. "Still do. And for the record, I've seen the company's books. It's all clean." But that wasn't what Phyllis wanted to hear. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Come on, Amanda. What's he really planning? What's the big secret he's holding back now that the mask is off?" Amanda folded her arms, the tension behind her eyes betraying the neutrality in her tone. I can't tell you anything, she said softly, firmly. Client privilege. Phyllis let out a small scoff, then gave her a narrowed stare. Fine. Be a lawyer. But don't pretend he doesn't have something else brewing. Amanda hesitated, then deflected. Maybe we should go to dinner. Take a break from all this. But Phyllis didn't want a break, she wanted in. Something about this whole charade had intrigued her in ways she couldn't explain. She didn't feel betrayed like Lily or humiliated like Billy. No, what Phyllis felt was momentum. She had seen reinventions before, had performed a few herself. And something about the way Kane had pulled this off, something about the transformation from corporate screw-up to billionaire recluse, impressed her. It didn't matter that it had been rooted in deception. What mattered was that it worked. And now she wanted a seat at the table before Kane revealed whatever came next. Later that evening, after another round of gossip began to circulate through the drawing rooms, Phyllis found herself outside in the chateau gardens, phone in hand, trying to shake the questions from her head. But instead, she found herself dialing a number she hadn't called in weeks. Nick. When he picked up, she didn't waste time. I need to know what you think about all of this, she said. Kane, Dumas, whatever we're calling him now. What's your take? Nick, ever the measured one, took a breath before answering. I don't really have one, he said. We were never that close. I don't remember a single time I called him for advice or business. He wasn't in my orbit. Phyllis nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see her. Right. But he's in it now. And you don't think that's interesting? Nick gave a quiet laugh. You sound like you're okay with this. She was silent for a beat. I am, she said finally. He didn't hurt me. He didn't steal anything from me. And honestly, I respect the reinvention. You know me, I'm flexible on what that means. Nick didn't argue. But the tone in his voice shifted slightly. Just be careful. Reinventions always come at a price. And people like Kane, they don't change. They just change the packaging. Phyllis smiled at the truth of it. Maybe. Or maybe the packaging is all that ever mattered.